Bakum boga. Bakum boga. Alright, we got an update in the Rodney Reed case. And speaking of which, I don't normally ask, but I might start having to ask you guys to like the video and subscribe to this channel if you like my videos and want to see more of them. This Rodney Reed situation, the last or first video on the free Rodney Reed that I did, got quite a few dislikes. People like voicing that they did not like the video. So if you like the video, I'd like you to voice that. Just so I can get a clear picture of how I'm doing here. So we're going to jump right into this. Update. Texas court halts Rodney Reed execution over questions of withheld evidence and false testimony. In a dramatic turn of events, Texas's Court of Criminal Appeals issued an indefinite stay of execution for Rodney Reed, pending further court action on 3 points of appeal, including whether Reed is actually innocent of the murder that sent him to death row more than 20 years ago. On November 15th, the state's highest criminal court concluded that questions about whether prosecutors withheld exculpatory evidence and sponsored false testimony at Reed's trial, along with the question of Reed's innocence, should be kicked back to the trial court for further vetting. Reed, now 51, has been on Texas's death row since 1998, when he was sentenced to die for the murder of a 19-year-old woman named Stacy Stites in Bastrop, Texas, a small town about 30 miles east of Austin. DNA collected from Stites' body at the crime scene was matched to Reed. On the basis of that match alone, prosecutors drummed up a theory of the crime that alleged that Reed had hijacked Stites' pickup truck while he was on foot in the pre-dawn hours of April 23, 1996, as Stites drove alone on a state highway on her way to work. This was the theory that the prosecutors drummed up that put him in jail for over 20 years. That he somehow, while on foot, overpowered Stacy Stites, who was driving down the highway. Why she would have stopped for him if she didn't know who he was and had no relationship with him is never established. When he was questioned about the murder, Reed at first said he didn't know Stites, but soon relented, saying his DNA was there because the two were having a consensual affair. A situation that would have been perilous. Reed is black, Stites was white, and she was engaged to a man named Jimmy Fennell, a white police officer in a neighboring town. Prosecutors alleged that the DNA was the result of a stranger encounter with Reed, an argument they bolstered using testimony from Fennell about his apparently loving, monogamous relationship with Stites. But evidence that has steadily emerged since Reed's conviction casts a far different, much darker picture of the relationship between Stites and Fennell, adding credence to Reed's assertion of a consensual affair. In the brief that the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals considered before issuing the stay of execution, Reed's attorney, Bryce Benjet of the Innocence Project, offered new information that reinforces the argument that Reed is innocent and undermines Fennell's account of his relationship with Stites. They would tell Stacy and she would run and hide from Jimmy, Derleth said. They told me they were concerned that if they did not alert Stacy to Jimmy's presence in the store before he found her, he would start a fight with her. Fennell's attorney, Robert Phillips, recently told me that such accusations against Fennell are not credible because they were not made contemporaneous to Stites' murder. These Hail Mary 11th hour people who are coming out of the woodwork 20 years after the fact, including law enforcement officers. I ask this question: where were you all this time? But according to Derleth, he was working at the Bastrop County Sheriff's Office back in 1996 and informed his colleagues of what he knew at the time. I am not sure what the members of the sheriff's office I told this to ever did with it, he said. Another man, William Sappington, also had a story for police back in 1996 that was apparently never followed up on. Sappington, who has since died, lived in an apartment downstairs from the one Stites shared with Fennell at the time of her murder. According to Sappington's son Brent and daughter-in-law Vicky, Sappington talked about the verbal and potentially physical abuse that he heard in the apartment upstairs perpetrated, Brent and Vicky said in the affidavits, by Fennell. According to the couple, they had also heard the altercation upstairs, and they knew that after Stites' death, Sappington reported the information to police. They said Sappington told them that the police said they weren't interested. When Stacy was killed, Daddy was devastated, and he told us that he contacted law enforcement to tell them what he knew about Jimmy's abuse, but was told that Jimmy would not do that type of thing and was not involved in Stacy's death. He told me he could not understand why investigators were not more interested in speaking to him since Jimmy and Stacy were directly above his apartment. In granting the stay of execution, the court is questioning whether the state violated Reed's rights by withholding information from his defense lawyers, while the state had an obligation to turn over case-related information from all local law enforcement officers. The accounts of derelict and others suggest that did not happen. It is not controversial to say that the cops protect their own. And it's not surprising to hear that contemporary stories of witnesses that told police about Fennell's behavior were not heeded and played no role in Reed's case. They were not voiced. Those opinions were not heard. Those stories were not told. They were withheld. And they provide pertinent context to the relationship that Stites had with her fiancé, that the victim had. Alright, let's not forget, this is about justice, not just for Rodney Reed, but for a 19-year-old girl who was raped and murdered. Or at least murdered. Rodney Reed's already been in prison for over 20 years. And the more and more evidence that comes out is just overwhelmingly likely that there's no way he could have committed this crime. And the state did the right thing in the face of overwhelming resistance to the fact that they were going to kill him. Their hand was finally forced. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing we did. If you were at all a part of that, if you signed the petition, if you protested, you should feel good about that. And moving on. United Healthcare terminates contract with Houston Methodist. 100,000 plan members affected. As many as 100,000 United Healthcare plan members could lose in-network access to all 8 Houston Methodist hospitals and dozens of its outpatient facilities on December 31st after the insurer announced it was dropping the major hospital system from its network. So, under our current healthcare system, if you like your doctor with your private health insurance plan, you don't necessarily get to keep that doctor. Your plan is subject to change. The move would affect anyone with a United Healthcare employer-sponsored plan as well as those covered under the insurer's Medicare Advantage program for seniors. Both the hospital and the insurance company confirmed on Thursday. United Healthcare, the nation's largest insurer, has also said it would drop roughly 800 Methodist-employed physicians from its network on April 1st, 2020. So, in our system, you have competing health insurers who have networks of healthcare providers, and whichever doctor you want to see has to be within that network. And if that network ever changes, well, so does your doctor, likely. And this is the very lack of freedom, the nonsensical lack of freedom that we just shouldn't be tolerating in a system that makes sense. Right? You should be able to go to whatever doctor in your area you would like to see, seek care, and get it. That's how it should work. It's pretty simple, and it's done effectively in every major part of the world, in every developed nation on Earth. And so there's no reason why we should be putting up with this any longer. And this is even if you're lucky enough to afford health care in this country, because a lot of workers can't even afford health care because they don't earn enough money, because the minimum wage is so low. The minimum wage needs to be raised to at least $15 an hour. People have been asking for a $15 an hour minimum wage for about 10 years now. It's about time it's actually going to be a little bit higher. The cost of living keeps going up. No action gets taken. So the minimum wage is just going to need to go higher. And yes, you'll have to do it over time. You can't just jump the minimum wage. That would be problematic. But the fact of the matter is, it's too low. I got into an argument on Twitter because somebody thinks the economy is fucking wonderful right now. The market is setting records. Unemployment is at an all-time low. Oh my goodness. You know, the same metrics that Donald Trump cried foul and said they were misleading, right? The unemployment rate. Oh, it's not even the real unemployment. When Obama was bragging about his unemployment rate, Donald Trump said, hey, mate, unemployment rate's way higher than what you're saying it is. And that's true, because the unemployment rate doesn't factor in people who stopped looking for work. That's by definition unemployed. So that if you're just unemployed for long enough, you're no longer unemployed, you're super unemployed? I don't know, but you're not unemployed, or at least you're not counted as that. Also, the unemployment rate doesn't tell you that most of the jobs that people are getting in this economy are low-paying jobs. And that's why we have $1.5 trillion in student loan debt, $850 billion in credit card debt, 78% of workers living paycheck to paycheck, 40% who can't afford a $500 emergency. The top 1% in this country take home 24% of the national income, right? But they only have 5% of the nation's personal debt. So this whole belief that the rich who make the money are putting it back into the economy is simply not true. Because the bottom 90% of this country has 73% of the nation's personal debt. They're the ones that are putting money into the economy. More, in fact, than they can actually afford to. And guess what that creates? A giant bubble that is going to burst, right? Our capitalist system creates boom-bust cycles in the economy. And that's very stressful. But it's only stressful to the bottom rungs of society. The wealthiest people, they get to go to the government and ask for bailouts. So they actually reap some benefits of socialism. Funny how that works, how we have socialism in our system, but only for the wealthy. So all we are asking, people like me, is for that socialism to be spread a little more. And part of the change in the system that we need to see is we need to fucking audit the rich. Because we're not doing it because it's too hard. The IRS has been underfunded, so only poor people have to pay unpaid taxes. And GQ explains it all here. This is a direct result of years of conservative-led efforts to successfully defund, defang, and delegitimize the IRS. Over the past 8 years, Congress has steadily reduced the agency's enforcement budget by billions of dollars, down 25% from what it was in 2008. And by cutting out only relatively small chunks at a time, the gutting was largely avoided public outcry. Unsurprisingly, according to ProPublica, the IRS is in disarray on the inside, resulting in a bureaucracy on life support. ProPublica estimates that as a result, the U.S. is losing at least $18 billion in revenue each year. In a letter to Congress, Rettig told Democratic Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon that he and the agency are well aware that it would be far more lucrative and productive to pursue tax fraud and evasion of the wealthiest Americans, but without Congress restoring its budget, there's no way to make that happen. This is part and parcel of a Republican political strategy otherwise known as starving the beast. So-called fiscal conservatives like Paul Ryan claim that the federal government can't properly run basically anything and use that as justification for cutting funding, support, and resources to agencies like, say, the IRS. Once an agency starts underperforming because of its slashed budget, that's used as still more evidence that government can't effectively do its job. Deliberately mismanaging the federal government, then, is a central tenet of modern-day conservatism. And this is nothing new. I mean, these people will starve the EPA, put people in charge even, whose sole mission is supposed to be to, protect the environment. The people they put in charge are either coal lobbyists or otherwise businessmen whose sole interests are for the profits of industry and not for protecting environmental regulations. So they put the wolves to guard the henhouse. You can guess what happens right off the bat. They're going to empower businesses to get away with not paying taxes and with polluting the environment, among several other things that they can just get away with as long as it is profitable for business. And this is the kind of rampant corruption and poison in our political system and in our everyday lives now that has become intolerable. And that's why when we have has-beens like Barack Obama trying to tell us now, hey, don't go too far left, that's the only way to go. Frankly, when you're talking to Wall Street and extrapolating from that Democrats should heed this warning as well, you're basically saying that Democrats should keep paying attention to Wall Street and their interests and not pay attention to the interests of the American people, who you say are too far left. I'm pretty sure we should have politicians that are representing the people and not Wall Street. Maybe we should go a little further left than you were willing to go. Democratic 2020 presidential candidates have rejected criticism from former President Barack Obama after he warned the field of White House hopefuls not to veer too far left because it would alienate voters. Though Obama did not mention anyone by name, the message he delivered before a room of Democratic donors in Washington on Friday was a clear word of caution about the candidacies of Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, who are seen as two of the top-tier candidates in the crowded field. Sanders and Warren have called for massive structural changes and policies that would dramatically alter the role of government in Americans' lives. The centrist wing of the party has warned for months that a far-left nominee could alienate moderate Republicans and independent voters needed to oust Donald Trump. The average American doesn't think we need to completely tear down the system and remake it. And I think it's important for us not to lose sight of that, Obama said. Addressing Obama's comments over the weekend, Sanders told a forum in Long Beach, "I'm not tearing down the system. When I talk about the healthcare being a human right and ending the embarrassment of America being the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care for every man, woman, and child, that's not tearing down the system. That's doing what we should have done 30 years ago." And he's absolutely right. There is a rich tradition of Democratic politicians and presidential candidates endorsing Medicare for All. John F. Kennedy supported Medicare for All emphatically. It's not only fulfilling the legacy of many, many Democrats for many, many years trying to fulfill this issue for Americans, because the insurance industry has fought it tooth and nail every step of the way. It's also about other Democratic presidential hopefuls muddying the waters on Medicare for All and trying to make it seem like, every Democrat is basically trying to get the same thing, healthcare for everybody. And that's simply not true, because some Democrats are financially incentivized specifically to repeat insurance industry talking points and make it seem like people want choice more than they want a real fundamental change in the system. They want more choice, and that's simply not the case with our current system. Right? We've already talked about how the illusion of choice that you get with insurance companies. It's a choice of what middleman you want saying what they will or will not get for you, as opposed to you just saying, "I want health care," and getting what you need. What this illusion of choice here is with these Democratic presidential candidates, people like Cory Booker or Pete Buttigieg, Medicare for All who want it, it's a selling point. It's trying to give you the language of Medicare for All without the promise of it. They're trying to weasel their way out of a very popular policy that people are rallying behind. They can't outright oppose it because people like John Delaney and Hickenlooper, who opposed it, are already gone. You can't do it in this election. You're not going to get anywhere. Julian Castro, a 2020 Democratic candidate who is going nowhere, said while he takes what the former president says seriously, he also believes any of the 2020 Democratic candidates would be better than Trump. Their vision for the future of the country is much better and will be more popular than Donald Trump's. Better? Probably. More popular? I don't know. I really don't. And I don't think you can say that with much confidence, considering that Hillary's vision, while just tepid and not just too wonky and not very good, was better than Donald Trump's. And she was pushed to the left on a lot of that by Bernie. So most of the good stuff in her platform was Bernie's anyway. There are a lot of persuadable voters, and there are a lot of Democrats out there who just want to see things make sense. They just don't want to see crazy stuff. They want to see things a little more fair. They want to see things a little more just. And how we approach that, I think, will be important. even as we push the envelope and we are bold in our vision, we also have to be rooted in reality and the fact that voters, including the Democratic voters and certainly persuadable independents or even moderate Republicans, are not driven by the same views that are reflected on certain, left-leaning Twitter feeds. Bernie Sanders, in the 2016 Democratic primary, won more votes with Democratic voters who leaned conservative than Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is far more conservative than Bernie Sanders, and yet Bernie Sanders won them overwhelmingly. Not only does that run counter to what Obama is saying here, it pretty much shows that people don't understand labels. And our broad notions of what conservative and liberal actually means is kind of too broad and nonsensical to actually define, much less categorize in the way that people tend to do. So all of this he just said is virtue signaling nonsense, and you can pretty much dismiss it. That's pretty much all I have for this video. Thank you for watching, and remember to like it if you made it this far. I hope you did, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.